You need a PKI infrastructure. You may have one, but did you build it properly? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Koning, and here from headquarters at Onto we bring you Threat Talks, a deep dive. And the subject of today is the private key infrastructure, how to set it up. Let's get on to it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me briefly introduce our guest of the day. It's Rob Maas. He's the field CTO of Onto and on a day-to-day basis thinking about anything security. And a couple of weeks ago, we promised you, when we were talking about SSL decryption, that we would organize a whole episode on the PKI infrastructure because we need that kind of infrastructure in order to properly decrypt outbound traffic. Isn't that right, Rob?
That is right. For outbound traffic, we need to sign or generate a lot of certificates and sign them. And therefore, you need a public key infrastructure. At least that's one of the reasons you need
there's multiple. You want to make sure every time you sign a certificate and don't use self-signed certificate and all that. So you need an easy way to create certificates.
Another good example would be management interfaces of nowadays. Almost every management interface is web-based, often encrypted, luckily. And then it comes with a self-signed, but it's better to put in.
Always replace it. And how do you do this without going to a vendor online and buy one? Yeah. Okay. And for SSL decryption, quickly once more, what we talked about is if I want to decrypt my outbound traffic, it means that my firewall or decryption device needs to sign my session on behalf of this website I'm visiting, huh?
More or less. So the firewall is in between. It acts as a man in the middle. It will set up a proper connection with wherever you're going to, for example, Facebook. And then it will generate a certificate that mimics the certificate of Facebook, but then signed by a certificate that's being trusted by your clients. So that if the client gets the certificate, it will trust the certificate of the firewall. And then the connection can be set up and the firewall can read along because it is in the middle.
Yeah, we need some kind of infrastructure that we call private key infrastructure that somehow makes sure that all those devices, laptops, phones, and all that trust this signed certificate. That's what this whole thing is about. Okay,
that's correct.
So what is it? PKI? Is it then a server? Is it what?
Yeah, it's more or less a framework or a setup. Not sure what the right words would be here, but because you can do it almost completely offline without servers. So there are a few components that require a server, but most of the things you can do even offline. But you can also go almost a fully automatic way, like Let's Encrypt with the ACME protocol. We'll come to that. And then everything in between. I think most companies will end up in kind of a hybrid setup.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're going to talk. We'll start with explaining a little bit about the basics, and then later we'll explain exactly how we did this because we have our own PKI infrastructure, and we can share exactly how we did this. Actually, I think it's nothing secret about it. Maybe the passwords and the location of the key.
Don't share the private keys, but the rest you can share.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to do that. But let's first. There is this thing, a notion of a root certificate, a chain, and intermediate. Tell us a little. Yeah, please explain the lingo for us.
The whole idea about the public key infrastructure is we need certificates that are being trusted. And the way we do that is by creating what they call a chain of trust. And at the top of the chain, there's always the root certificate. So that's where it all starts. And the root certificate is really a simple certificate. More or less, you create a certificate and it will sign itself. So the root certificate will basically say, I trust myself. That's where it starts.
So the only certificate you can self-sign, you're saying? We do all the other certificates, but the one thing we can sign ourselves is the root certificate.
Yeah, it signs itself. You have to start somewhere.
Okay.
That's also why, and we come to that you should never lose that private key that belongs with the root certificate because there's no fallback mechanisms anymore.
Yeah, and this does happen. I recall we are Dutch, so it means that we have to diginote our...
Diginotar is the most famous one that lost the root certificate private key, and then other people get a hold of it and could mimic that they were trusted, and they mimic that they were Google, for example. That's also how it came to light.
Yeah, because the public part of this key was actually distributed in all the operating systems and all the browsers.
Yeah, the funny fact here is that... and also another part, we'll jump ahead a bit here, is that in order to trust your root certificate, you should send it to all your clients to the so-called Trusted Certificate Authority list. And it can, in Windows, that's a special folder. It can also be, for example, Mozilla has its own Trusted Root Certificate Authority list, so the browser needs to have it. And you send it everywhere. And when DigiNotar was being compromised, Microsoft put out an update that retracted the DigiNotar as a trusted certificate authority, except for the Dutch. We got 30 days extra in order to replace all our certificates.
Yeah, because we get to that. It's not nice if you lose your signing certificate.
No, you already have a problem.
Yeah.
So it starts with the root. It signs itself. You should never lose that key. It's really important. Put it in the safe. Then the next thing.
One more question about this. So the roots, there are roots that are commonly accepted in the world, and that's why the internet works, correct?
Yeah, so that is what we call the trusted root.
Microsoft, Google, the big ones, they all put it. They have a group of
Let's Encrypt is maybe now the most famous one.
Let's Encrypt, yeah. And they all have an agreement that they put that in the browsers, they put it in all the operating systems. So operating systems then, because they know the public key, everything that stems from that, they can validate.
Yeah. So and then that's what brings us to the chain of trust. So you have the root, then you create an intermediate certificate because the root you will bring offline. So that's not very handy if you need to sign another certificate. So the root can then create what we call an intermediate certificate, and that certificate is able to sign in more or less in name of the root the certificates that you ask. And you can have multiple intermediates, but typically you have 1 or 2 layers. What happens then if I go to a website that has a signed certificate, so I retrieve the public certificate, it will also tell me it's signed by this intermediate, and then it will also lead me to the root, and it can verify all these certificates.
Yeah, in the show notes we have a diagram of this. That explains this. Yeah. So in the signing certificate, that intermediate one in between. So we have the actual server certificate. That is the one that is actually that encrypts the whole handshake, right?
Yeah.
And that is then signed by the intermediate, and that intermediate
is signed by the root.
Is in turn signed by the root, and you have to get them all so you can validate the whole chain. That's the whole
idea behind a public key infrastructure. Yeah.
Why doesn't the intermediate the root simply sign everything then?
Yes. So
why do we need this intermediate thing?
The first thing is just not practical because you want to really secure your private key. That's one reason, because if that gets compromised, there is no fallback. You cannot say I will retract it and create a new one. And that brings me also to the second part of this. So first you want to securely store this key. So signing is hard because you have to get that key online. But the second thing is, if it is compromised like with DigiNotar, there's nothing left. Your whole chain is gone. And if you do put an intermediate in between, if the intermediate get compromised, then we can retract that. There are challenges with that. We'll come to that. But the root can create a new intermediate. So we have kind of a fallback mechanism.
And then you can re-sign everything.
We have to. But then at least we can do something. Otherwise, we have to completely start over again.
Okay. How do you get a certificate signed, by the way? If you don't have a PKI and I want to sign my public website?
Yeah, so there are 2 ways. A proper way and a less proper way.
You're saying this with a smile, so there must be like 90% of the certificates requested are done in an improper way. So
right? I think it's changing with Let's Encrypt, but still a lot of companies go to an internet provider or a certificate provider and say, okay, I want a certificate, this name, these are the host name, and these fields I want to fill in, and then they are creating that certificate with the private key and send it to the customer.
So they generate the key pair, sign it, and then you download everything at the same time.
Yeah, correct.
Which means that they have their private key.
Exactly, and that's exactly the point why it's not the proper way. It's because you put a lot of trust in the certificate authority that signed your certificate. So the better way or the proper way.
So this is an honest moment for you as a viewer. Do you do this? And if yes, listen on.
Yeah. So the proper way to do it is you go to your server where you need the certificate, and there you create a private key and a signing request. You can do that with OpenSSL. I think that's the most common tool, but there are multiple. And you create a signing request, and the private key sticks on your server, and then the signing request you send to the certificate authority that needs to sign your certificate.
So the signing request does not contain the key itself, but a fingerprint that's
it contains the public information, and it is more or less the fingerprint. And then they can generate a certificate out of it, and they send you the certificate, but that's only the public part of the public key.
Yeah. So and if something in that channel is broken, so either someone steals my signing request or the response to that, is that a problem?
No.
No.
Because
that's great.
What you get back is public information, and what you send, you want to have it signed by a trusted authority. If someone else signs it,
Yeah,
it's
good for them.
not going to sign my.
Yeah. Okay, understand. Okay, so we talked about the root intermediates and the actual server certificates that are. Can you see the difference between those? By the way,
if you in most operating systems, it's quite easy to see it because you can go to the certificate and then open the certificate and you see who has signed it. Quite often, you can see it even in names because people also like to work smart and this is the intermediate because it is called intermediate but you can see the whole chain in most operating systems by simply opening the certificate.
Yeah, okay. If you go to ontoit.net and you click in your browser on View Certificate, there's actually 3 tiers. One is the root certificate. Probably. It's probably signed. I don't know by whom out the top of my head. But then there is an intermediate and there's a certificate. Yeah. What if my private key gets compromised on my web server? Then I cannot use that to sign to use it as an intermediate, huh?
Yeah, because there's no rights on that certificate.
Yeah, because it has a type.
Yeah, it has a type. Yeah.
So
the intermediate is sometimes called the subordinate, but the official wording is intermediate, and subordinate is if it is an intermediate with a layer on top of it. If it is multiple layers, it's not a subordinate anymore. So it's
now we lost
kind of a terminology thing.
Okay, good. So how do we set this up?
Yeah, so we start with creating our root, sign itself, put the private key, create an intermediate after it, and then immediately put the root certificate private key offline. So we create the root creates intermediate, and then the root is going offline, so nobody can touch it, and then the intermediate can sign certificate. So it's more or less 3 steps to start with it.
And that's just how then? I mean, do I get my laptop or you say?
Yeah, so you can all do this with. This is also, I think, one of the problems why a lot of companies don't have set it up properly. You can do it with OpenSSL, but you really need to understand the concept of the chain of trust or the root CA in order to do so. And OpenSSL is a command line tool. Once you know the steps, I don't think it's really hard to do. But most administrators that do set up the PKA, it's just kind of a side task. So they don't do this full time, or maybe they don't see through the whole process. And there is not a lot of good tooling. I think Microsoft did an okay job with the Active Directory certificate services, I believe it's called, which gives kind of a UI to it. So it makes it maybe less scary to set it up. But still, you need to do the same. You follow the same principles. So, if you use the Active Directory certificate service and you have set up a root server containing the private key, bring it offline and only bring it online in a kind of a process when you update the server. But it makes it. I understand, but I think it makes it more accessible for some people.
Okay. Now I would do it completely different. Actually,
so how did you do it?
Well, we have our own root certificate at ontoit.net, for example. And the first thing we did, we created the offline system, right? So we have an offline system, and it's just a Raspberry Pi. That's all it takes, literally. And what we did is we took an operating system, stripped it down, choose a Linux distro that's really simple, with not a lot of packages and everything. It's not the most important thing, but the most important thing is you boot it and you never connect it anywhere. The only thing you need to make sure of is that the OpenSSL tools are on there, because it's simple enough. I mean, you need to document it. Just document how you do this, and anyone who's listening and want to know, just reach out. We can share actually how we build it. It's not all that difficult. And indeed, the first step is we generated a private public key pair. Now, this operating system itself is a read-only file system, so we are sure that even that nobody really can tamper with it. If it's an extra precaution, because it's air-gapped anyway, so nobody is going to touch it. But the key itself is on a removable drive. And we made a copy of this. We actually made two copies of it with different phrases on it, because there needs to be a passphrase on the private key. Because even if our private key would leak, you still couldn't do anything with it, because you'll need a private key. And we have people called key bearers, and we have 2 of those. and they keep their passwords in a non-digital way. So in their mind, they are allowed to write it down somewhere, but not within Ontoit in a very secure location.
Not on the back of the USB stick.
No, and also not on on a yellow marker in the monitor, that kind of things. No, and it's a very long one. And come to think of it, a phrase like Ontoit was founded in 2005, and we've been having a lot of fun since! Exclamation mark. That's a good password for this, right? And not like it should be easier to remember, or your favorite poem or whatever. And those two key bearers have their own key. So with their own password that only they can know. And of course, you just select those. And that's an important role. They don't have to be any technical. They need to be able to carry a USB stick and to memorize a very long password and not forget it and don't throw it away or because that would be not nice. Because what we figured is on one hand, we want the key to exist as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
The root key. Why? Because we need the public part. We need to this is a problem. We have we are now at Ontoit ca3.crt is the file name that we spread around a company like crazy. So all our endpoints have it. So we have Jam for our Macs, for example, that pushes it everywhere on all the operating systems.
This is the part where you put the public part in the trusted certificate authority list.
Yeah. And that's a job. That's a
especially
job.
for unmanaged devices.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So for the Macs, it's easy because we have a tool for this and it can push it, and we have integration with DEP, with Apple, and all that to make that happen. But we also have a lot of containers running everywhere. Well, that's based on Docker files. And in every Docker file, you download the certificate file, put it in the operating system chain, and then say update certificates binary.
You don't want to have a root that expires every month, or at least every day.
So our current, I actually looked it up. Our current is a CA3. It was signed in 2020 for 20 years. Because I remember this conversation. We were there, like, okay, what shall we do? And of course, there's all kinds of regulations and stuff. So we have SOC 2 and ISO and all those require that we have a crypto policy. And the States, we actually changed it. We said, listen, we need to, because it was like 1 year or so. And for a root, that is unacceptable.
That's very short.
It's 20 years now. And we said, because probably we need another solution. Anyway, the world has changed so much by then. We did a lot of things to never have to change it again unless disaster happens. The reason, by the way, we were signing this in 2020 because our company existed already for 15 years before that. The previous one actually was still valid till 2025, but it was RSA 4096 crypto, and we shifted to the elliptic curve one. Was that the ECDSA? I always forget what the acronym stands for. So the reason we revoked, well, we didn't revoke the one initially, but the reason we wanted to go for a new one is to have the best encryption algorithm commonly accepted. So that's what we did it for a long time. And so that's on one end. We want to have this as long as possible. We never want to replace it again. On the other hand, we want to have really short-lived certificates, because if one of our containers that has a certificate gets compromised, we don't want that to be a problem. So if it only lives for a day, that's best. No. And that's what we actually do. That's where the Let's Encrypt comes in. We'll get to that in a bit.
So now I'm also curious, how long is the intermediate valid?
That is, I didn't write. I think it was 5 years.
Okay,
we have two intermediates actually.
Okay, makes sense.
One is for offline certificates, and that's valid for 5 years.
Offline certificates means
maybe it's 2. Come to think of it, offline means that we sign those. We use it to sign offline in a similar way. So with the same Raspberry Pi, with the same read-only file system, with a different key, because there's 2 other key bearers that have our intermediate offline signing key.
Okay, makes sense.
And that one we use to do stuff that actually requires a signing request that you just mentioned. So if there's, for example, a firewall that doesn't support more dynamic ways like the ACME stuff. And that from time to time needs to get here, because every month or so we figure out what certificates are going to expire in the next 2 months, because we keep that's a pain, huh? Yeah. You need to figure.
I don't want too much manual signed certificates.
No, because you need they expire. I mean, didn't Office 365 go down once because
not that long ago? And I think everyone knows about sites and even internally that went down, or at least give a certificate warning because they forgot to update the certificate. Or
so if you suffer from the same problem that you have to re-sign certificates all the time manually, you're probably on a good path, actually. Sorry to tell you. Well, there is a better one online, but not every technology is supported.
Well, maybe a nice anecdote here is that I I have the bad habit of not closing down my computer, and certificates here at Ontoit expire in one day. So sometimes it's catched with my browser, and then it says, okay, but now our internal server is not trusted anymore, and I really need to clear the cache or close the browser and reopen it to get rid of that message because the certificate is being renewed.
Yeah, indeed. Well, and that's the other signing certificate, and that's what we call an online signing certificate. It's signed by the same root, and that we do have to renew every year. So every year, the root certificate needs to, the key bearers of the root, one of the key bearers needs to come in, remember the password, go with one of the IT guys, go into a room, we boot up this Pi, and with USB stick and everything, we transfer the signing with a signing request, and we put that on. We are going to sign all of the files of the website or whatever it is. It's typically a little bit older equipment that needs all that. But we really, of course, hate that. So the one thing we actually want to do is every year right now we re-sign our online signing certificate, and that is there's an ACME server that's in a separate protect surface, so there's really little traffic that can go back and forth from it, because that is the only signing certificate we own in the company that is online and in memory of a machine. So that is close to the keys to the kingdom, I would say. So we heavily guard that, and once in a year we refresh it. And it's the ACME protocol. That's what Let's Encrypt is built off. And every web server, every container that needs a certificate talks to this server and identifies themselves, and then gets their signing request signed, and therefore they have their the signing request. So they generate their own key pair, the web server, and then they generate the signing request, get it to the ACME server, and the ACME server responds to it.
Yeah, the ACME server will basically do a check to check if you really own the domain that you are requesting a certificate for. It can do that on several ways. I think HTTP 01 is called. It's the most easiest one. It will just run a file with an authentication code on a specific address, just plain text, but it's only to prove that you own that domain.
Yeah, so our web server talks to the ACME server, hey, I want this certificate, here's my, and then they say, yeah, you can say that you are that server, prove it to me, and he'll connect back to you. And indeed. And because it's fully automated, we can do this like crazy. Like indeed, like you say, it's every day we recycle. So if any key that is signed by this online signing certificate is being compromised, a day later, before we can ever replace any key or put it or whatever, it's impossible to use it.
This is a good process because also, for example, Google with Chrome, they have a consortium that really is pushing for short-lived certificates. I believe they are now pushing for 3 months, but I think they want even shorter.
Yeah. What I would think we should do as an industry is make sure that it's like an hour or so. So every hour all certificates renew, and ACME protocol actually can make that happen, because if you're halfway your expiry, then you're going to renew, so you can miss a few tries. That's not a problem. And then whenever a key is compromised, no problem, because before the hacker is able to do something meaningful with it, face your user, and it's not there anymore, so it will be invalidated. Yeah, it's expired. So that's all good. So that's the second thing you need to build. So one thing you need to put that Pi in with read-only file system. So you just need a Linux nerd actually, and that understands OpenSSL and can read. I mean, it's
but
not
still in the debate. I agree. This is way more secure than having Windows machine, because there are a lot more vulnerabilities in there. It's more bigger, more components, etc. But still,
stripped down OS. You need a stripped down OS.
But still, you can more or less do the same by just putting those server offline. But to really do that,
certainly offline. Yeah, but Windows on a Pi, I don't.
No,
we just need a console.
You can do it virtual or physical, and of course, having a physical like a Pi completely separated, hopefully maybe even stored in a safe or somewhere. That's way better. But if you want to start and not feeling comfortable with Linux, for example, then I think Windows can function as well, but make sure that you put it, especially the root offline, but even the intermediate if it is for manual signing.
Yeah, intermediate is the same guardianness, or what's that? The same protection mechanisms in place as the root. We guard it as well with key bearers and all that. Why? Because it's also valid for a longer time.
Yeah, maybe good to add here for if you are a larger company. There is also special hardware that we call hardware security modules, where you can store the private key. And then the hardware security modules take care of all the security. Still, to be fair, I'm a big fan of keeping it offline. Even those systems are hardened and are there to protect your private keys, they are still offline because systems need to access that hardware security module.
Yeah, exactly. So just the smaller, the simpler, the better, really. And make 2 copies. I mean, of course, there's 2 different key bearers in different locations and all that. Setting up ACME server, by the way, isn't all that hard. It's that's just Googling for ACME or Let's Encrypt or whatever.
That's maybe, I was looking online if there's also an ACME server for the Windows, for the Active Directory certificate services. There's non-official. There are some third parties that can make it work for you. So if you really want to go that way, there are options to also do ACME with the Windows server.
Yeah, indeed. And I'd recommend use ACME all the time. And it's fairly simple. 2 projects that you need to run. Guard this online signing certificate thingy, the ACME in a separate VLAN. Make sure that nobody can access it. It's just that protocol that's enabled. All that.
And maybe good to add here. And maybe you skip that a bit, is we have the root certificate, then you have an intermediate, but you can also have multiple intermediate, like you just told. So you have an intermediate for the manual signing and one for automatic. What I would suggest, if you are going for decryption, so that's why we ended up in this topic, is create another intermediate, because that's going to your firewall in this case. And if something goes wrong with your firewall management interface, it gets compromised, or there is a vulnerability, or you don't trust it anymore, then you can easily only pull that one back instead of all the certificates.
Yeah, indeed. So what if you lose a key?
So if it is for a certificate, there are 2 processes. So certificate revocation list and the online certificate status protocol. Those 2 processes, what will happen is if a certificate is being presented to, let's say, your browser can look up what's the CRL or the OCSP belonging to this certificate. And with the CRL, it's more or less a static text file that's being downloaded, and it can look up, hey, is this certificate on this list? If it is, then it's revoked. With OCSP, it's more of a dynamic question to the server. Hey, is this certificate still valid?
Yeah. Who likes this besides you?
Well, I think it's for everything where you don't manage the devices.
Nobody.
I think there are no better options if it is a public infrastructure.
That is true. There's no other way around. Yeah, but the point here is, I mean, if suppose you issue certificates, and every time a certificate is used, you get a request by that entity whether or not the certificate is still valid. That's crazy, right? Nobody likes it. That's the whole point, and it's slow.
No, true.
It's also slow. Browsers don't like it because it's slow, right?
Yeah, but I know where you're heading. And we talk a bit about the denoter and the update that was delayed for the Dutch people, because we could not retract it from the Trusted Root Certificate Authority. If you do that for your private public key infrastructure, that's perfectly fine if it are managed devices. But if they're not managed, it's still hard to everywhere pull back your trusted intermediate.
If that ever happens to us, I'll invite you if you think it's okay to do. I really wouldn't want.
Better is to not lose the key.
But if you do, well, actually, you know what we would do so the root key. I mean, then you broke your chain of trust. You need to start over.
Then it's over.
Yeah, like when there is when you need a stronger protocol, like we did before when we went from our version 2 to version 3, for example, or when you lose it in a diginotar scenario. Then that means that you have to push it to all your endpoints. If an intermediate would be broken, it would be what you can do is issue that intermediate and push that through the same mechanisms as an invalid certificate.
Yeah,
and that's not a dynamic revocation thingy, but you push it into the same operating systems everywhere. Yeah, that's easier to do, and it's also if you covered 80% in the first couple of days, that's already so much better.
Yeah, but still that works only if you manage the devices.
Yeah, true.
That's the whole
we're talking about
here.
The PKA infrastructure. That's ours, right?
Well, not necessarily, because it's not different from Let's Encrypt, PKA, or GoDaddy or VeriSign. Yeah, it's the complete same principle.
Yeah, okay, but that's if they lose their key, right?
Then yeah, but if they lose the, so that's
an external party that does that, right?
Yeah, but if they lose their intermediate, then of course they have a problem. But still, all those trusted certificate authorities needs to be updated and pull back that trusted certificate. And this is something overlooked for also with firewall vendors, for example, that can do a check if the certificate is valid, because they can also check if the chain is completely valid and trusted. But if such an intermediate is being leaked and compromised, then you should also, as an administrator of that firewall, pull back that certificate from the firewall. And I think these are processes that are often overlooked that belongs also to the package if you're an administrator of a firewall, for example.
Yeah, is it something that an firewall administrators need to do, or is that you think the responsibility of the vendor to retract it?
I would say it's the administrator, and especially with this kind of hardware, because if they retract it, it will often be an update. Mm-hmm. And especially with updating such central equipment, people are really careful with that, because if the update goes wrong, then it can bring down the whole environment. So I would not wait for the update. I would do it myself first. And then later on,
you're saying vendors, firewall vendors, or anyone who does man-in-the-middle encryption is going to be a little bit conservative about retracting keys because it will break stuff.
No, it's so let's say let's pick Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt has an intermediate. It's by default trusted in all the firewalls. They get that intermediate gets somehow compromised. Hopefully not, but let's assume. Then, as a firewall administrator, you should pull back that intermediate from your firewall as being trusted, because maybe I have a policy that you can only visit sites where the whole chain is being trusted. And if I don't pull it back, then all those sites that were signed by that compromised certificate are still seen as valid.
Yeah, but why doesn't the firewall vendor of Fortinet, Palo Alto Networks do that for you?
And they will do, but it will take them probably more time, and then they bring out an update, and then I need to find a maintenance window.
Yeah, okay. So
be very careful by updating your firewall.
Yeah. I mean, there are many companies
it's more or less the Windows denoter all over again.
Yeah, and many organizations are 2 or 3 major firmware versions behind on their firewall, unfortunately.
And that's
we can ask our guys. Yeah.
All kinds of reasons. Yeah.
Okay. Clear. Any other challenges that may arise here?
I think maybe it is a challenge. We should make sure that you always use valid certificates everywhere you can, because you don't want to train your users to click up, okay, I trust this.
Yeah, and when you have a PK infrastructure, it's much easier to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, and I think that's really good, because what I see in a lot of companies is that we're basically training users to simply ignore certificate warnings, and they are there for a reason.
Yeah. Well, browsers get more pesky
browsers
all the time.
Now take it more.
You need to type in texts. I won't name them here, to allow a browser to actually proceed on a certificate error. Yeah. Okay, so to-do list. I want a PKI. First, I buy myself a Pi, then select a operating system and strip it down, make sure OpenSSL is on there only. Then you generate a key pair. Make sure you designate some key bearers and some procedures around that, of course, to and with properly don't remove the passphrase. And that's one thing. Then you sign a couple of intermediates. Everything you like, there's actually more. So indeed, the firewall has an intermediate. The offline certificates for the rest of the stuff. We have the client certificates probably. It's probably different. Yeah. And those are also under key bearer scrutiny. And then you have your PKI set up, more or less. And then you want the online signing thingy as a second project to be done. Just use the ACME protocols, the industry standard. Everybody uses it, open source. The whole cost of this all is $30 so far, the Raspberry Pi, and some time, and a weekend of nerding.
Yeah, I think you should do it. Just OpenSSL is free. You can just play around with it, set up your own.
And document it, so every system administrator can easily, you teach everybody how to generate a key pair, how to make it a signing request, and how to do the signing thing.
Yeah, it should be really easy.
All right. Well, we have things to do or not, and if that's true, then I congratulate you. All right. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you for delivering on our promise. And to you, if you like this video, please like it. It will help us spread the word further. We would appreciate it. And if you click the subscribe button as well, then next week there will be another episode like this in your inbox. And from the security headquarters here at Ontoit, I thank you very much and goodbye. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Ontoit Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.